Hello, it's the middle of the week and we're checking in, and I wanted to talk for a minute or two about agreements. We've probably all had the situation where someone has agreed to help you with something and then at the last minute they back out and say they can't. And it either complicates your life a whole lot, or maybe it puts a full stop on what your plans were because you were counting on them. When somebody says yes and then their actions say no, well, that's frustrating at best. Jesus actually had something to say about that. He said, just say yes or say no. Anything more or less than that is from the evil one. In other words, if you say, yes, I'll do it, but then you don't, well, that's evil. It's wrong. Or if you say, no, I won't do that, but then you go ahead and do it, well, again, you're going against what you've said, and that's just wrong. Jesus said that, and he used simple language, but it applies just as much to you and me making an agreement about something as it does to, say, two huge superpowers sitting down to the table and making an agreement. If you say you're going to do it, the expectation is that you will. Now, here's another thought. What if somebody else, maybe your father, your mother, agreed to do something for someone else and they didn't? And then they pass away. And then that person comes to you and says, well, what are you going to do about it? Now, right off the bat, that feels unfair. Somebody else made the agreement. Why should I be held accountable for it? But here is the problem. As a follower of Jesus, I look to the Bible for the way I'm to live my life, but I also see in the Bible a long history that I've adopted as my own. And in that history, God makes agreements with people. And he'll make that agreement with one person way back here in history, and then generations later, he'll hold somebody else accountable for that agreement, and also hold them accountable for everything that happened by other people in the meantime. The prophets are full of challenges and chastisement from God, where he is telling his people, look at what you have done down through history to break all of the promises you made to me. And God holds them accountable for it. Now here's the beauty of it. Here's the good news of it. All of those broken promises down through the generations that God expected his people to hold up, he actually took those broken promises, put them on his shoulder, and died for them. He went to the cross because of everything that every generation had done. And he didn't even have to do that. He didn't deserve it. He certainly wasn't the one who broke the promises. He said yes, and he meant it, and he followed through on it. God is telling us just how important our yes and our no is. Not just in the moment, not just in my life, but down through history. It matters because it affects him, but also the way we live reflects him or doesn't to the rest of the world. Why am I talking about this? Well, I've had the privilege over the last couple of weeks to be a part of an online conference that is called We Are All Treaty People. And it is put on, well, it's hosted by Kanata Baptist Church, one of our sister churches, but it is actually being presented and hosted and led by Indigenous believers, and they're sharing a history that has been, by and large, been ignored, forgotten, or suppressed. And it's the story of treaties, agreements, that were made years ago and that have been either forgotten or just completely abandoned. In fact, those who came to this country from Europe, in particular the British, made these agreements with our indigenous neighbors, and within a few short years or a few generations, were ignoring them completely. So, a lot of us could say, well, that was then, but I haven't broken those treaties. Well, treaties are meant to be honored, and when they're not honored, it affects everyone. And we have neighbors today who are living with the duplicity of these agreements, of people failing to follow them, of saying yes, but really with their actions saying no. And we have neighbors who are longing for justice there. As a follower of Jesus Christ, it matters to me that I belong to a country that stands up for the agreements it makes. And it matters to me because I know it matters to God. He wants my yes to be yes and my no to be no, but he also wants the yes and no of the nation that I live in to be yes or no. That we should be consistent, that we should do what we agree to do. And when we recognize that we have failed to do that, well, it's time to make a change. I have a lot to learn. I feel like just an infant when it comes to the knowledge of our history, our shared history with our Indigenous neighbors. But I'm also so far behind in understanding the injustices that they have lived with and that, well, I've ignored because it didn't really seem to affect me. I want to live in a country where God's ways are what are prevalent, that we stand up for our agreements, that we honor and love our neighbor, that where we see injustice, we seek to make it right. Not because we want somebody to be better off than somebody else, but because we want there to be equality. God sees this as a matter of justice and a matter of mercy. I need to learn more. Maybe you need to learn more. Maybe you and I need to talk to somebody who is Indigenous and say, hey, tell me about these agreements. Tell me about how it's affected you, how it's affected your family. Help me to understand what I can do today to make a difference. Our agreements matter. They matter to us, they matter to others, and they certainly matter to God. And it's just part of living our life in Jesus Christ. And our life in Jesus Christ is worth it.